Within hours of being inaugurated, President Joe Biden began to roll back Donald Trump's immigration policies. He signed 6 executive actions, all geared toward a more humane and generous policy, and outlined an ambitious proposal for comprehensive immigration reform, including a path to citizenship for more than 10 million undocumented immigrants living and working in the United States. President Biden campaigned on easing immigration controls.
But the fact is that, look, we should not be locking people up. We should be making sure we change the circumstance, as we did, why they would leave in the first place. And those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them, keep them safe until they can be heard.
Including a moratorium on deportations, an end to former President Donald Trump's Way to Mexico policy for asylum seekers, and halting the construction of the border wall. That platform gave migrants good reason to believe it would be easier to get into the U.S. if he were elected. Unfortunately, all of these vital efforts could be undermined by decisions that are producing a new immigration crisis on the United States southern border. On Biden's first day in office, the Department of Homeland Security issued a memorandum freezing all immigration removal actions for 100 days, unless the removal concerns an alien who was suspected of terrorism or espionage, or otherwise posed a national security threat. Less than a week later, U.S. District Judge Drew Tipton issued a temporary restraining order sought by Texas, which sued the Department of Homeland Security memo that instructed immigration agencies to pause most deportations. Tipton said the Biden administration had failed to provide any concrete reasonable justification for an 100-day pause on deportations. On February 2nd, President Biden signed 3 executive orders to set up a task force to locate migrant families separated under the Trump administration, to reshape the U.S. border and asylum policy, and review restrictions made to the legal immigration system over the past 4 years. He established an interagency government task force led by the Secretary of Homeland Security that will be charged with identifying all migrant children who are separated from their parents.
And so with that, I'm going to sign the first order, which is a reestablishment of the interagency task force and a reunification of families. Second order I'm signing is creating a comprehensive regional framework to address the causes of migration and to manage migration throughout the North and Central America, and to provide a safe and orderly processing of asylum seekers at the United States border. Third order I'm signing is restoring the faith in our legal immigration system and strengthening immigration and inclusion efforts for new Americans.
On February 7th, it's reported that Central American families and children have been crossing in numbers that point to a building crisis. Republican critics of Biden say the new wave is the start of the crisis they have long predicted, invited by the new administration's eager rejection of Trump's deterrent approach. With the U.S. capacity to hold adults and children reduced by the pandemic and the temporary closure of the largest Border Patrol facility in South Texas, U.S. Customs and Border Protection began dropping families off at bus stations and shelters. On February 19th, House Committee on Oversight and Reform Republicans sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas on the impending health crisis at the border and the administration's plan to mitigate President Biden's border crisis. The Republicans requested information on how the Biden administration plans to reduce illegal border crossings by unaccompanied alien children and family units, and how they plan to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in facilities along the southern border. On February 25th, a federal judge issued a second ruling that blocked the Biden administration's planned 100-day pause on most deportations indefinitely, saying the approach was legally flawed. Judge Tipton said the new administration was entitled to leeway to formulate its enforcement priorities and review the Trump administration's immigration policies, but a need to assess priorities does not necessarily mean a pause on government functions, he said. On March 2nd, at least 15 people were killed and about a dozen others were taken to the hospital after a crash in Southern California. The crash occurred in Imperial, California, just north of the Mexican border. A vehicle filled with 27 passengers hit a semi-truck full of gravel. The next day, it was determined that 13 people killed in the vehicle crash had been smuggled into the U.S. through a hole in the border fence shortly before the crash. On March 8th, it's reported that thousands of migrant children are backed up in the U.S. detention facilities along the border with Mexico. The number of migrant children in custody along the border had tripled to about 3,250, and many of them were being held in jail-like facilities for longer than the 3 days allowed by law.
To put it succinctly, the prior administration dismantled our nation's immigration system in its entirety. When I started 27 days ago, I learned that we did not have the facilities available or equipped to administer the humanitarian laws that our Congress passed years ago. We did not have the personnel, policies, procedures, or training to administer those laws.
The next day, when President Biden's press secretary was asked if there was a border crisis, she replied with, and I quote, "I don't think we need to put new labels on what we have already conveyed as challenging." Days later, on March 13th, the Department of Homeland Security announced it will deploy FEMA to the southwest border to help care the surge of migrants arriving at the border.
This crisis is a result of President Biden's open border policies. It invites illegal immigration.
It's more than a crisis. This is a human heartbreak. The sad part about all of this, it didn't have to happen. This crisis is created by the presidential policies of this new administration. There's no other way to claim it than a Biden border crisis.
On March 16th, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said the U.S. is on pace to see the largest number of migrants crossing its southern border illegally in 2 decades. The next day, former acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf warned that the surge of migrants to the southern border won't stop as long as those making the journey see other individuals being allowed to stay in the U.S. That same day, in an interview, Biden was asked if it was a mistake for his administration not to anticipate the surge at the southern border following the 2020 presidential election.
And a lot of the migrants coming in saying they're coming in because you promised to make things better. It seems to be getting worse by the day. Was it a mistake not to anticipate this surge?
Well, first of all, there was a surge the last 2 years, in 19 and 20, there was a surge as well.
This one might be worse.
No, well, it could be, but here's the deal. First of all, the idea that Joe Biden said come, because I heard the other day that they're coming because they know I'm a nice guy and I won't do what Trump did.
They're saying this.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. They're not. The adults are being sent back, number one. Number two, what do you do with an unaccompanied child that comes to the border? Do you repeat what Trump did? Take them from their mothers, to move them away, hold them in cells, etc. We're not doing that. So what we're doing is we have brought in HHS and also brought in FEMA to provide for enough safe facilities for them to not to get out of the control of the Border Patrol, which are not designed to hold people for long periods of time, particularly children, get them out of those facilities. And most of them come with a phone number. So what we're doing is we're putting together an entire organizational structure so that within 7 days they're able to get in the phone, contact that number, find out whether there is a mother or a father, whether it is safe, whether it is a secure circumstance to get the child to that adult.
It's going to take some time, though, to get those policies in place again. Do you have to say quite clearly, don't come?
Yes, I can say quite clearly, don't come. And what we're in the process of getting set up, and it's not going to take a whole long time, is to be able to apply for asylum in place. So don't leave your town or city or community. We're going to make sure we have facilities in those cities and towns run by DHS and also accessed with HHS, Health and Human Services, to say you can apply for asylum from where you are right now. Make your case. We'll have people there to determine whether or not you are able to meet the requirement you qualify for asylum. That's the best way to do this. In addition to that, while we also change the circumstances on the ground in those communities, you're going to diminish the reason why people want to leave in the first place.